meeting of the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting. First order of business is to verify that the meeting's been properly posted. Mr. Clark?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely certain of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Next order of business is opportunity for citizens to speak, and I believe we have at least one speaker here tonight, or more. We'll see.
Microphone or?
Yeah, if you go, that little thing is a microphone right there. And
Right in front there, there's a flatter part. You just touch.
so, as we talked, name and address, and you have about 3 minutes, more or less.
My name's Mary Emery, 202 North James Street. My daughter is a sixth grader at Saratoga. I'm also the president of the Waukesha Preservation Alliance, which is a nonprofit. We advocate for and educate about historic properties in the greater Waukesha area. I do consulting on historic preservation projects and also on historic tax credit applications. The former Environmental Education Building and the Harvey Phillip buildings are on the National Register of Historic Places and the State Register of Historic Places, and they were both built in 1914. It is a high honor to be on the registers. Only the best buildings qualify. These are the last two buildings left from the Reform School for the State of Wisconsin, which opened in 1860. It was an interesting concept because not only were troubled youth housed here, but orphans and children whose parents could not take care of them were also housed here. The school continued until the 1960s and housed 350 boys at one time. Currently, the Harvey Phillip building is being utilized by STEM for larger projects. The Environmental Education Building is harder to incorporate into the STEM campus, but it could be done with some effort. Another option that could have been explored with the Environmental Education Building is leasing it to a business that could have taken advantage of the historic tax credits. Currently, there is a 40% tax credit for commercial historic properties, so historic properties are very desirable right now. Being successful in finding someone to lease that building would involve finding the right set of developers or businesses that are familiar with historic properties, then finding the right fit for that campus. So I do see the difficulties with the reuse of the Environmental Education Building. If you approve the demolition of the Environmental Education Building, I would like to ask that some of the historic elements be kept from the building. However, I would like to focus more on the Harvey Phillip building. The facilities report for Harvey Phillip shows that the building is in good condition. Structurally, it is sound, and most of the items on the report were for ADA compliance. From a cultural standpoint, it makes sense to keep the Harvey Phillip building and utilize it for the STEM school. Historic buildings provide a sense of place and a source of pride, which is important for the children of our community. Showing them Waukesha's unique history and talking about how it shaped our community gets them more interested in getting involved civically and being engaged in their community. Economically, it makes sense to keep the Harvey Phillip building for the STEM school. The STEM school is cramped in Saratoga, and they have started utilizing the space in Harvey Phillip. Renovations to Harvey Phillip could be done gradually without disruption to the STEM programs, thus providing continuity. There is also a waiting list for the STEM school, and they could handle more students if they had the space. The facilities report shows that renovation of Harvey Phillip will be more cost-effective than building a new building. Environmentally, it makes sense to utilize Harvey Phillip for the STEM campus. 25% of material in landfills is construction and demolition debris. Demolishing a typical two-story commercial building eliminates all the benefits of recycling 1,344,000 aluminum cans. Studies show that commercial buildings from the 1800s to the early 1900s that are upgraded for energy efficiency outperform comparable buildings from the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. I know that it is not on the agenda tonight, but please keep the Harvey Phillip building for the STEM school to use. Thank you. And as a side note, our organization teams up with other organizations in the city to put on preservation days, which is coming up, and I have brochures here if you guys would like them.
Okay. What's the date of preservation days?
May 21st through the 25th.
Okay.
And La
Thank you.
Casa on the 25th will be giving.
Thank you very much, Mary. Would anyone else like to speak at this time? Please come up and give your name and address.
Evening.
Good evening.
My name is Alan Schultz, and my address is S30 W29455 Williams Way, Waukesha, Wisconsin. I didn't really plan on speaking. I don't have any terrific insights, but for 3 years I lived next door to those buildings over there in an apartment house, and back in the middle 50s when it was being used for apparently what it was supposed to be. Back in those days, we were just told it was reform school. I didn't know about all these other things then. But I remember there was a pretty teenage girl lived downstairs from us, and she was always very popular talking to all the boys over there. And I remember meeting some of the people. They didn't seem bad. I didn't know why they were there. But on the other note, I'm interested in alternative energy and all those kind of things, and no surprise, I suppose. I agree with Mary that I think those buildings look like they're made to last 1,000 years. I haven't personally inspected them close for quite a few years, but I believe that if you kept the exteriors and just modernized and insulated the interiors with all the business that's done in the cloud and all these kind of things, it wouldn't take that much to make them very efficient, useful buildings for somebody to use, whether it's private or whether it's governmental. I'd like to see them preserved very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Okay, thank you all for your comments, and you're always welcome to come to the meetings and express your perspective on things. With that, we'll move to the action items tonight. First action item is the approval of the food service provider. Mr. Clark, do you have any preamble to this? There was quite a bit of information in our packets.
There's quite a bit of packet, but actually Joe's going to present this information, so.
Well, to begin with, we prepared a request for a proposal in January. It's a document where you use the prototype from the state of Wisconsin, and we got input from other districts, and it was just decided that we would go out for bid. We've had Sodexo since 1995-96, but administration thought it'd be best to go out for bid. We're in the third year of a 5-year contract where you can have consecutive renewals. It's a 1-year contract, and then there's 4-year consecutive renewals. So we're in the third year of that. So we decided to go out for bid. And then we did have bid meeting tours in February, and we had 7 companies come for that. And all 19 companies on the DPI list were invited. We had a deadline submission of March 10th. All 7 companies that went to the pre-bid meeting did submit a proposal. And then we had a committee of administrators and support staff. And we had a 100-point scale, which we detailed out in the packet. We went through that scale, and it was based on criteria that we established in the RFP. And the things that we talked about in the RFP were the financial outcomes, the experience, references, and service capability, financial conditions and accounting reporting systems, food service director, overall staff, professional development, innovation, promotion, and improvements for student and staff, and then menu selection, which is food quality and variety. So we went through the whole evaluation matrix, and we decided which companies that we wanted to meet with for presentations. And we selected 5 of the 7 companies to meet with for presentations. So they came out on a Friday and a Wednesday following the time when we went through all of the different binders. All of the RFPs were, all of the food service managed companies put a great deal of effort into their RFPs. I mean, you know, they're quite big binders that go over everything that we discussed in detail. So they all made a tremendous effort in presenting their best possible case. So what we did as a committee is we went through all of these RFPs. We decided to select 5 of the 7 companies to come in for presentations. And then we ranked them on the 100-point scale. And unanimously, we selected Aramark. We thought that they would provide the best food quality and variety. Let's see, what else did we rank them on? Based on on Aramark, we ranked them the highest in experience, service capability, management and personnel, innovation and promotion of the food service program, involvement of staff, food quality, and menu selection. They were the second best bid in terms of price, 3.45% higher than the lowest proposal. But based on the information gathered in the process, we're quite confident that Aramark would give the best overall food service for the district and drive participation, so we can enhance our quality and service to the students of the district. And then just to To reinforce that, we went to the Appleton School District, which is of comparable size to the Waukesha School District. It's slightly larger. We toured a middle school, elementary school, and high school. And the committee was very impressed with the food quality and variety that was demonstrated there, as well as the quality of the staff. So based on all of the metrics that we went through in the whole RFP process, which started in January, we feel that Aramark, would give us the best service for the district, all of the things that we're looking for in terms of what we can provide best to our students, to increase participation in the program, which would increase better nourishment for our students, to keep them engaged in the learning process. And then this increased participation also result in more reimbursable meals for the district, to continue to allow the food service program to grow and be self-sufficient. It's a fixed price contract, and as you can see going through the food service proposal cost analysis, it's currently at the same price that Sodexo is at this year. So we're really no increase in cost, but what we are banking on is really driving participation, because it's been declining the last few years. So the cost analysis is just based on what we're looking at right now with current participation. But we're looking at participation, if we execute this plan appropriately in this partnership, we're looking at the participation continuing to build each year instead of decline. So these numbers would even be enhanced. And then we're also looking at paying this with a purchasing card, which will provide a rebate of 1.78%. So that's an additional savings that we did not have in the last agreement. So we spent a great deal of time on this, administrators, support staff, a lot of evaluation, a lot of good input from all the partners. And we recommended the committee to approve Aramark for a one-year contract with 4 consecutive renewals. That's at the option of both the district and the food service management company. Each renewal is.
So we can answer any questions. There are representatives from Aramark here, Rich Chapman, Mary Jo McLaughlin, and Brian Mand, who was someone I was very interested in. Brian's actually going to be our district operator or manager for Aramark. So those 3 are here to answer any questions you have, or Joe and I can talk to you about process or finances or any other questions you have.
Ryan, check.
Thank you. When you toured, was it both of you? Who was on the committee when you toured?
It was our wellness coordinator, Melissa Beck, in my office, Joe and I, Rob from Les Paul. One other?
And then Glenn Norder also.
Oh, Glenn.
Okay. I didn't know if it was this committee member. When it says the committee members traveled, I didn't know if it was you guys.
No, we had a district employee
Okay.
committee we put together.
And did you eat the food?
Yes, we actually had it for lunch. We had a grab-and-go breakfast and snacks pretty much throughout the whole process. Absolutely. We also got this, we timed the tours so we weren't staring at empty cafeterias. It was live lunch service. I was more, and I think Glenn was more interested in how the lines are set up, and I wanted to go to schools that were roughly the same ages of our schools. I didn't want to go to a 2014 high school that was, a completely different design than what we're dealing with. So I think they did a nice job of aligning those schools to look at what we're doing. And then Appleton, one of the reasons, besides being kind of a sister district in terms of size, they also are pretty advanced in wellness, student and staff wellness. So I know Melissa had a lot of interest in having conversations related to that.
Then on the financial impact, it says this is a fixed price contract. The food service management company being recommended will maintain the same overall cost to the district as the current contract with Sodexo. But with the, on page 8, it says the food service proposal cost analysis. Sodexo came in at $3,141,521, and Aramark was $3,120,900, or $3,120,940. So there's around 20,000 less. Is that because in 1 year it's going to raise $20,000?
See, what I wanted to do is give you a benchmark to see where we're at for this fiscal year, 15-16 fiscal year. And then that's, what we did then is take what we're selling in different quantities for each one of the breakfast, lunches, and take it times the new meal rates. And then for the 16-17 year, it's basically in the same, it's 3,120,000. So it's right at where we're at this fiscal year for the next fiscal year, within $21,000. So it's just to show you that comparable to this current fiscal year, we're starting the new fiscal year on the same par based on the participation we're having now. So if you take the different meal rates and you take them for next year and this year, it's the comparable cost.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine?
I think it's good that we bid this out because we want to see where we are in relation to other companies. My concern is where Sodexo ended up in the grading. It seems like quite a precipitous fall in their quality or their service to us or their ability to serve us or their management or whatever it is. I mean, I remember when Sodexo was quite a bit higher in the 90s, and now they're second to the last. So, I mean, I think that we should keep a better eye on our vendors, maybe, because that's 30 points. That's a 30. I mean, they were at 95, I think, or real close to that the last time we went over it. So they dropped 30 points in
Mr. Como?
how many years?
I think that speaks to an important point. And at least from what I read in the packet, what I would probably strike that up to is that, and Aramark points this out, they have a 5-year plan where each year counts, not just the first year and the 5th year. First year to figure out what are those low-hanging pieces of ripe fruit that need to get fixed now, and the 5th year making sure they get competitive from a contractual perspective. Each year should have a plan, should be a good year, should be looked at independently. And one of the things that stood out for me was that each year counts according to their plan, at least. So
That was something, and Joe does a very good job of the DPI requirements and the qualifications or the points you want to hit on in terms of reporting back to them. I was more into the vision of where we're going, the rebranding of our food service program. And Aramark, as part of their presentation, I think that's where they separated themselves. Because we really didn't talk finances at all. Joe and I did internally, but the committee, we really wanted to focus on where is this next partner going to take us, or if it would have been Sodexo, where is Sodexo going to take us? But to me, this is a chance to reintroduce our food service program. But it is going to take time. It's mid-May, and Aramark, if the board approves, will be, doing summer school. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. But over the multiple years, I think we will have that refreshing of the whole program, which I think will be helpful.
I just don't want to be back here in 5 years and see Aramark at 64 and somebody else at 95, I guess.
Well, that could happen. First of all, it depends on how you bid labor.
Yep.
If you bid too low and then get into severe quality problems, well, then that will change that. That's one issue. I actually toured Aramark for 8 years when I worked in Appleton. And they're a high-quality company. And last fall, you recall, we had a big discussion, this committee had a big discussion about improving the quality of the food. I have no doubt at all that Aramark will do that. I mean, they were always on the cutting edge in Appleton. I can't imagine they would have changed much from that. And I knowing the administration in Appleton, if they weren't doing a quality job, they wouldn't be there. So knowing what and how Aramark operates, I have great confidence in them. I think one of the other things that was different this time. The RFP process this year was much more detailed, involved more people, and looked at a lot more areas than the last one was kind of done quickly to meet the letter of the law by DPI. And when that happens, you don't get, the quality doesn't enter into it. But, I have eaten Aramark lunches and I've eaten lunches here in our district, and I just would urge you strongly to select Aramark.
Ms. Ronachek, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up the points. I forgot to mention or to ask why menu selection and food quality is only 10 points at the bottom. I would think it would be worth more than 10. It's just right on the front page.
Sure. Well, we wanted to get in all the different benchmarks that they require in the RFP process. And menu quality and selection, it really is encompassed also too in, getting feedback from the students and staff. That's a reflection of the menu quality and variety. And it's also a reflection of the innovation and professional development. To get the right menu quality, selection, and variety, it encompasses, you have to have all those other parts in order to do it. So we felt we needed to evaluate all those other parts to come up with that result that you're asking for.
Joe, can you comment on the chef and some of the new
Yes.
services?
Yes, that's another very good point. We required in the RFP process this time to have an executive chef for the district. So that's going to really, when we did evaluation of all the other districts and the management teams, one of the big things they all said is you need to have an executive chef on your team to help drive that enthusiasm for the students and to get that good quality menu selection and variety. So we did add an executive chef to the team. And then also Brian has a degree in, he has a degree right from the food service from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in dietetics. And we are going to have somebody just also dedicated to, they're looking at the dietary portion of the menu and making sure that is all in the guidelines that we're looking for, not just getting that from a corporate district menu. We're getting that right from on site. So we're looking at getting an executive chef involved in the process, and that was one of the big recommendations of all of the people that we talked to.
And as a mom, is the food, when I was in school, the food was made at the schools. And I think with Sodexo, it's just brought in already heated. Where is their main location, their hub? And are these guys going to take that over and make the food there and then just transport it? Or is this executive chef going to, how does that work?
I'll try to summarize for Aramark, but if I fail horribly, you can feel free to step in. Right now, we kind of have that kind of central kitchen mentality where you deliver, and some of that's driven by our facilities. Some of our buildings weren't designed to even have food service offered, so we've made adjustments where needed. But that goes to that long-term plan. Aramark would like to get more service at the schools, in particular the elementary schools, so it's fresher, tastes better. There's a better, it's more appealing. So again, that's a transition. It'll take a couple years to make, because we are very much a central kitchen and divvy it out to the satellite locations right now. But that was one of the things we covered in our tour at Appleton too, is they kind of showed us how it could work even in not perfect spaces. So we think we'll have a fresher, more at the site type of service model than what we've had.
Just one, before I turn it back to Joe, just one thing to point out. I mean, tell me if I'm correct here, that when you look at the bid, which was a big part of the criteria, I think, was financial. Sodexo came out basically of the 6, 2, 4, 6, came out next to last in terms of the financial bidding.
That's correct.
And that's because we probably asked for more things than what they traditionally provide, like the executive chef. They probably added some more cost into their bidding process. Is that the assumption?
I would make that assumption. I also think if you remember how this whole conversation started, was Sodexo coming back to us asking for an hourly rate adjustment from their previous bid. So I think they were also adjusting for maybe where they think that hourly rate should be, but I'm completely guessing, and I'm not here to speak for Sodexo and how they put their proposal together.
And I would also add that, in our past, we have a new business manager here, but I think our past thoughts on food service was always, well, we must be charging too much because people aren't choosing us. Well, I always thought it had something to do with quality, and, if you don't have the quality, why wouldn't they go to McDonald's? I mean, so it'll be interesting to see the shift in quality because we weren't getting that from Sodexo in the past. And we did get a new person that came in that was supposed to help with that, had some experience at one of the other school districts. But other than that, they weren't really going to give us even that without us pushing for it. So if I look at the history associated with Sodexo, it's been a good relationship, but it could have been better. I wouldn't say it was that they gave us bad service. It's just that it could have been improved on. And as Mr. Gray said, I would say that maybe we took the easy way out in the past with our evaluations. This time we did a more thorough effort. So, which I'm appreciative of. Mr. Como?
Yeah, I like the more detailed processes Dr. Gray had mentioned, including Melissa Beck, our wellness coordinator, I think was a good move. She, I'm sure, was pretty excited about the wellness initiatives outlined on page 24. The farm logic sounds actually quite good to get connected to our local sources. I think that's a whole national movement, and it looks like you're on top of that and perhaps even leading in that area. And I think that's really an important aspect to quality. So we would expect just from that an improvement in quality. I thought too, there was one question that I had. If you turn to page 23 in our packet, in the proposal summary, earmark the second bullet point on the left. There was a projected return to the district over 5 years of $4,463,500. Could you explain that to me, what that means, and how is Aramark going about achieving that?
Is that their,
That's,
is that off the financial?
well,
No, it's right on page 24 there.
23.
Is it?
23.
Page 23, I'm sorry. I didn't quite understood what that meant.
And it seems like I should. Do you?
what they have, what I did when I did the evaluation is I just did based on even very conservative levels of growing the program 1 or 2%, we would still have a healthy fund balance. And the projections that they have may have also included, a little higher increase in participation by the time over that 5-year period. So
that number is based on increased
yes,
participation?
yes.
Okay. And what was the percentage growth that was projected for that?
Well, I just projected in our analysis, it gave the board 1% and 2% percentage growth. And that just shows you on the very bottom of the cost analysis, it shows you, the return that we would have to invest in equipment and to invest in other areas. It would be, be able to invest over that 5-year period, conservatively, maybe $1.9 million in equipment. So, but the overall return that they're projecting is probably just based on similar analysis, but a little higher growth in
So
participation.
it's through enrollment?
Yes.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Ms. Madden?
I just hope this is as successful as our bus contract. So it's an eye-opener for the school district to look at our contracts and maybe put them out on bid more often, because we're certain in getting better bids on it and quality.
Mr. Como?
And one other just quick point here, there's a free energy analysis too that Aramark had tossed out there, and I'm assuming that that's going to be going around to each of our building locations, and that's a pretty large effort. So I see evidence and fingerprints all throughout their proposal that really, I think, speaks to innovation speaks to improvement. And I feel comfortable enough to make a motion to approve that we award the food service management contract to Airmark Educational Services LLC for a period of 1 year with the option for yearly renewal not to exceed 4 additional years, effective June 15th, 2016.
Motion from Mr. Como. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Madden. Any further discussion? Comments? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next action item is approval of the Neola agreement. Mr. Clark?
Yeah, this is an item that's actually been discussed at the policy committee, but also at the board meeting in March, I believe it was. Joe Cook's here to help kind of fill in. I can talk to you about the financial impact. The fees to review our policies is $8,500, $8,550. And then if we would move on to administrative guidelines, it would be an additional $8,550. You know, they're a full service. We had just started the process of implementing Neola in my previous district. It's a very thorough, time-consuming process, but you end up with I think, a better product, a more user-friendly product. So Joe's here to answer any questions you might have on the process or the services. Again, I think it was covered pretty in-depthly at the board meeting, but if you have any additional questions, we're here to answer them.
Come on up, Mr. Koch, and we'll see if anyone has any questions for you. I'm sure there'll be one or two. Maybe there won't be. Maybe we'll just move right along. Any questions for Joe from the board members? Mr. Como?
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Joe, just first of all, I think this is a good idea. I'm supportive of this. I have a sense that kind of the way I look at this is an audit of our policy, and we've never had that done, and it's being done by some professionals, and I think it's actually a really good step. I also view this as potentially a time saver for you and your staff. And so that's kind of how I'm framing it here. But what happens if we go 2 or 3 years down the road and we're like, well, you know, we gave this a try and this isn't working out. I was trying to read through who owns what, so we don't fall into some place where we're parting ways. What would parting ways look like, and what do we own, what don't we own, what do they own? Kind of talk us through that.
So is this microphone? We went through this exploration in the beginning of this work in one of my prior districts, and that very question was asked. And at the time that the contract ceases, the district owns the current policy manual. You no longer have access to the electronic publishing that Neola provides, but you still own your policy book at that time. What you won't get in the future is the regular updates from Neola. So twice a year you get a policy update based off of state, federal law changes. And then intermittently you might get a update in November based off of legislative action. You would no longer have access to that. As time went on, any policy review would really be based off of then your own exploration, whatever updates you received from the state, federal government, the Department of Public Instruction, and then you would be on your own into the future. So one of the true benefits of Neola is getting those the twice-a-year updates, plus anything that would come intermittently based off of legislative action, and you would no longer have access to that if you.
And what are the ongoing fees once we get through this initial phase? What are the ongoing fees?
I believe there's a $2,500 a year update fee associated with the policy updates and continued online publishing of the policies.
And we're leveraging their lawyers for that? Everybody who subscribes to it leverages their
Correct.
lawyers?
Their attorneys are the ones that draft the policy and present the districts with what is their recommendation, meeting the legal requirement. The district is then able to go into that and determine if that, best suits, for instance, Waukesha schools. If there's a legal requirement associated with controversial topics in the classroom as a policy, they will give us what the legal wording is. We make sure that that fits our needs in Waukesha.
Okay. Have our attorneys reviewed these agreements? Which attorney?
I had WSB review them.
Ms. Madden?
I think this is a good deal for us. With legislation coming down at the rate it comes and the variety and the lawsuits that people bring, this is something that we really should do. And it's not that costly.
McCaffrey?
Out of my committee, Steve Schulman told me that there's going to be a lot of policy driven by data, student data, as we're capturing a lot of it with our email system and our the Google Drive. So we will be needing a bunch of revisions to those policies as well. So.
Okay, I figured most people would support this. My only concerns have been, and with the departure of Ms. Langell from the board, it makes it much harder to maintain a good quality policy write-up, because that was one of her specialties, and we always knew we had less work to do when she was chair of that committee. So I do think it's going to be complicated to continue at the same level that we've had for the last 3 or 4 years anyway. And I agree with the 2 board members that have spoken so far, or 3, that, more stuff's coming down all the time, and it makes it harder and harder for us to manage this by ourselves. My biggest concern is a lot of our policy is guidelines and directives that administration can fall back on and say, this is what our policy says, and it makes it easier in dealing with situations that pop up. I think for those to disappear would be a problem. So we'd have to have a process where we would still have our guidelines that administration can refer to when dealing with the community, with parents, with the press, and say, well, we're following the guidelines set out by the board. And there may need to be a component separate from what Neola offers, because I don't see them writing our guidelines for us. I mean, that's kind of like Common Core, where you're asking a far-off third party to tell you how to run your own local school district, and I don't think we want that. So.
The guidelines and the work done around the guidelines with Neola, what they're providing in guidelines are a good, sound suggestion, but they're not the be-all, end-all, because, again, the board has control over what the policy or what the guidelines are going to be. So that would still come in front of you, as it has in the past, for approval. The nice thing about getting some suggested guidelines are they will often think of things, because they've got attorneys that are working through them, that perhaps an administrative team didn't think of. An administrative team presenting something to the board for final review, the board may not have thought about that. So it really gives us another set of eyes on the front end versus, going through and doing the work, and then on the back end submitting it to an attorney for review. So we will still have control over what those guidelines indicate for us. If through this work there is a guideline, you see two fees in front of you, policy and then administrative guidelines. If we do have to embark on the administrative guidelines earlier, essentially being the same time that we're doing the policy work, we're in a position where we can do that and address, and I'm thinking of some policies where, such as the anti-bullying policy, where there's a list of steps in the guidelines that help us through an investigation. We can do those at the same time, where we get the policy passed and then we follow that right up with an administrative guideline recommendation to the board.
Yeah, I think that's the way we'd have to do it. Otherwise, we'll lose an important tool that we have in providing consistency in what we do as a board and as a school district, and clarity for the stakeholders, the parents, taxpayers, across the board. And I also see, there's some of the issues that become emotional at times, that by bringing in Neola as part of the policy writing and review, we can take the emotion out of it and look at the legal consequences. Example to me would be 8 years ago, almost, 7 years ago maybe, when the president wanted to start his new term with speaking to our school children, and the outrage that happened across most of Waukesha County with that. I think emotions drove us to kind of put together a policy at the time that, not that it was a bad policy, but it wasn't a policy that we've been following consistently, so therefore maybe it isn't a good policy, because shortly after that, the governor came, which would have been in violation of the policy, the way it was set up. So that's why I'm in favor of bringing in somebody like Neola, so at least if we have a policy, it meets legal scrutiny. It takes the emotion out of it, and then we can establish guidelines associated with the policy. We can't pick and choose based on many different things, who talks to our kids, okay here and not there, things like that. And we have to make sure we comply with.
And we do, with Neola, we do have the benefit, using that as an example of saying, say we want to talk about, politicians addressing students, do you have a policy on that? They're providing a service to 160, I think, school districts in Wisconsin, but they're also providing this service in 7 states in the country. So there's a high likelihood that somebody has some wording to begin that conversation, so that it does reduce the level of emotion associated with it and allows us to treat it as, not just the president wants to talk, but what about the local alder person? So.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I would move that we accept the contract with Neola at the initial cost of $8,550.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Madden, second from Mr. Caffey. Further discussion? Como?
So how will we determine, or who will determine if we need that second set of service? Is that gonna be as we get into policy, kind of have the policy committee take a peek at that and see how it's going? And
Right, there's a policy committee in 2 weeks, so if this goes through F&F and goes through the board, then in about a 2-week period of time, we'll begin the exploration and what's there. We could be back to you sometime this summer with a request for.
okay, all right.
Additional discussion at all? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. I'm sorry, I have to catch a plane. So I'll turn the meeting over to Ms. Madden, the chair, from this point forward.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Madden.
Safe travels.
Yeah, safe travels.
Okay, next on our agenda is the raising of the environmental education building. Glenn Norder's here in case we have any questions from him. Are you going to lead us in this?
Yeah, I
Karen?
can introduce the conversation, and it's a conversation that has been going on a long time related to that building, so, but the board had asked, actually prior to my arrival, of getting estimates for raising that building, and then during additional conversations, a request was made to, more for the purpose of getting a budget number, get a number on what Harvey Phillips would be, but just to be clear tonight, I'm just asking for authority on the environmental ed building. That building's sat idle since 1997, so it certainly is it's a good topic to be having right now in terms of the future of that building. I also included, just to give you an idea, and I think this is kind of the first step in a much larger facility planning conversation that we need to have. I did have Epstein Ewing just show what a rendering of that site could be. I'm not recommending that site, but I just thought visually it'd be helpful for you to see maybe what that property could look like over the next several years, if that's the decision the board would make. But again, I think that's all part of a much larger facility conversation. We need to, I guess in my mind, we started that conversation with the facility study being presented in January or February, whatever month that was. So the total cost to raise the environmental ed building is $113,000. Those funds were included in the budget amendment that the board approved in March. I think we had $105,000 or $100,000 in there, so I think the project's funded. It's now just a matter of the board giving the authorization for us to proceed with the work, which would be completed right at the end of summer school and before the new school year would begin. We wouldn't want to impact STEM at all. So Glenn's here, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have in terms of process or the project.
Mr. McCaffrey?
Quite a difference in the prices. Why is that?
Glenn, do you have
What was the difference? Was it disposal fees? Was it?
thoughts on the range
The
of the,
100,000 to the 113,000, is that what you're?
Yeah, from
talking about?
113, well, the variance is 185,749.
the low bid to the high bid?
Just wanting work. One company very busy, one company not having a whole lot of work at this time.
Does that concern you that they don't have a whole lot of work at this time? It always
No,
concerns me. when
I've done a lot of
contractors
work
aren't
with
working.
Robinson Brothers
Yeah.
in the past. They actually are the ones that raised the 2 homes that we had a few years back. So very successful with them.
Where are they located?
I think right in this area, in the Milwaukee area.
Good, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, and the only reason I say anything about it is because they were, the tunnels, the alternate bid 3 and 4 were, you're right in there, pretty close in there. But that, some of the other bids were way out. I just thought that was odd that there was such a huge amount. I mean, that's pretty big difference. 72,000, that's a lot on a job.
As far as removing the tunnels and everything.
Well, I mean, $72,000 discrepancy between the high bid and the low bid, that's huge.
Yeah.
Contractor,
Yes.
Um,
And we always, when that happens, Mr. McCaffrey, we always bring the folks in.
Okay,
And what I did on this one is I had our environmental management consultant kind of run it for me.
okay,
So they went through the bids just to make sure everything was copacetic.
okay,
Because that also is a red flag for me if you
Yep.
see such
yeah.
a high variance. But them going through the bid, myself going through the bid, we're very comfortable with where we're sitting with Robinson Brothers.
Is time frames contractual? We need it down in a certain period of time, otherwise there's a fine
We did
levied?
not build a penalty
We did not
into
do that,
that.
okay.
No.
And why didn't we do it? Did we ever do that? pretty
Normally,
common
when
in-
you build a penalty into a contract, you also build a incentive into a project,
Yep.
go along with it.
Right.
And we've stayed away from that pretty much.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, so are you asking, Darren, are you asking to do anything with the tunnel at all? Or,
No, the tunnel was if we were to proceed with Harvey Phillips, right? There's no reason to touch,
Yeah, and we really can't touch the tunnel
Right.
as long as Harvey
Just the
Phillips stays
heating.
up, because that's the heating source is the service building,
Okay.
which runs through the tunnel to HP and then about half of Saratoga stem.
okay. And we've been discussing this for years, actually, long before you came on, Darren.
well, you were discussing
Glenn.
it the first time I was here too, so.
Yeah, and Glenn, you know how many years we go back. We went through a process too, since it is a registered historical building. We went through a process checking with appropriate authorities on this. Can you kind of take us through what we did and as we went through the process?
Actually, Lori Dudley took care of that. She did all the legwork on getting it off the Historical Society's site and getting their approval to take it down. So she did a lot of legwork with the Historical Society to get permission for us to take that building down.
So there was a lady who commented on earlier this evening, Mary Emery, I believe is your name. And Mary had requested potentially being able to go into the building and see if there are any things that should be or could be preserved. Is there anything inside? I thought it was pretty well just gutted and.
I think there's, casework's probably one of the more appealing things that's in that building. Is that a fair?
That's a fair assumption.
Yeah, but what we're finding is that there's so much asbestos in there. You know, not that we're opposed to someone trying to, save the casework, but they need to know the liability and whether we want to take on that liability because, what was the cloth under the wood floors? Is cloth the right term that was full of
Yeah,
asbestos
the
and,
felt that they put underneath the wood floors back then contains asbestos. And the comment I got out of the gentleman that were doing the surveys was that they've never seen so much asbestos in that type of material. Actually, about half of it, 50% of it was asbestos, the material was. So that's under every one of the wood floors and then wraps up a little bit underneath the casework. So unfortunately, if someone wanted to get the casework, they'd have to have an abatement contractor come in and abate it for them to get it out. So it would just drive the cost up, so.
Okay, if someone was willing to perhaps pay for that aspect because it was important to them, would we potentially entertain that?
as long as they don't bump the raising back to December or November, or, you know, if they can do it in a time efficient way that fits into what we're trying to do. And we're here in early May, so I don't think that would be an issue. We're not opposed to that.
So if we were to entertain something like that, from a process perspective, if we approved the raising tonight, it wouldn't begin till June anyways. There'd be roughly a month to work with any groups that might be willing to work with us on that. That seems like a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, Mrs. Reiniger.
Are these, this is from Mary, are these doors and all of that still in there? Can you see those?
All I can see is you now.
You've turned it around.
Me and technology.
I hear you.
All right, how about that? So there's doors
Yeah,
and all sorts of transom windows and have all those been taken and now it's just the floors and the,
I believe all that's in there still. isn't it?
The interior doors are still intact. I can tell you that the exterior windows do contain asbestos, so they would not be usable to anybody. All of the caulking and glazing in the windows contains asbestos. That's why we actually had to board the building up years ago.
and I have a couple more questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
continue.
What does it cost to keep it, what does it cost the district to keep it just not using it? And like, do we have to keep the heat on to make sure that something's not gonna break? No. So it doesn't cost us anything.
We do keep the heat on at a very low setting. It's probably about 40 degrees in that building in the winter.
Okay, so we've been running the heat in there for, what did it say,
And you have to
since
maintain
'97?
insurance on it, not casualty, but liability insurance.
We've been
20 years. I mean, almost 20 years.
20 years of heating it at least to 40 and paying for insurance. Did we ever try to rent it out or lease it? Did we ever?
Environmental lead building, not since I've been here, I mean, it just isn't.
I'm going way back here. I think in the late 90s, we did try to lease it. I think there was even, I want to say it was like an architectural firm or something like that that showed some interest, but once they got in there, they just, it was completely non-ADA compliant. They just weren't, it wasn't a match for them. I can't say I remember the specific reasons, but we did try, you know, for quite a, I want to say a couple of years, we tried to get someone in there, but it just, either geographically it wasn't the right place for a business or the building didn't fit their needs, but there was an overwhelming interest at that time. I think that one architectural firm was the only one that ever, over that period of time, that ever showed any interest.
So in order to rent it out now, we would have to stick money into it to make it ADA safe and, okay.
Yeah, I think you'd be into a lot of abatement, both an asbestos level and a mold level.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Somebody want to make a motion, Mr.
I
Caffrey?
move for approval of raising of the environmental education building.
I'll second that.
Do you want any specifications on it regarding an abatement contract if somebody does want to come in and take these things? And is it okay with the person that's demolishing the building? Sometimes they want to take these out to rehab.
Well, them are the things we'd have to discuss after this conversation hearing, that maybe someone want to come in and salvage some stuff out of there. We thought when we talked, along with the environmental management consultant I'm using, that it would be very difficult for someone to come in and actually try to grab something out of there with the amount of mold that's in the building and with the amount of asbestos that's in the building. But I would definitely make sure that whoever is interested works through our environmental management consultant team to find out, if it's really worth their time to come in there and try to salvage any of it.
Okay, then we'll leave the motion as is. With no,
Yeah, and that was my intent to asking the question in the first place, just to see if there would be enough time, practical time for Mary Ann or other people to approach the district, and hopefully a month is enough time to think through safety issues, signing waivers, having whatever interested parties pay for anything above the $113,000. That essentially was my intent of asking that. And I think the intent of the motion too is to accept the bid from Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, the particulars around any salvaging could be worked out with district administration. I don't think it needs to be part of the
for the public's
motion.
information, we did have this on the market too for quite a while, trying to sell it. That did not work either, so.
Yeah, I don't recall, Darren, do you recall how long it's been on our list of extra properties? There's a few properties on it. It's been since I've been on the board, actually.
I can
think
tell
so.
you that
At least
from
14
98 to
years.
2002, it was considered extra property. Now, whether it was on a list or not, I can't say, but my guess is that's been the thought. I also think it's noticeable that the board didn't include it in the facility study, which tells me that the board doesn't plan on investing funds in that facility either. So, in terms of the person wanting to save the casework or the doors and that, I think where that conversation will likely start is us reaching out to our liability insurance carrier and having them outline, and working with EMC, having them outline the requirements of someone to come in there. It can't be just a guy in a truck, I don't think. I think it would have to be a professional abatement company coming in there. But those are things that Joe or Glenn and I can certainly work through for anyone who might be interested.
Okay, any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Have approval of Fund 46, the long-term capital improvement fund in the district's 10-year maintenance plan.
Yeah, this is all information that actually you've seen twice, and I think it's been discussed once at a board meeting in the early part of 2016. But I'll just give you a quick recap of the purpose of Fund 46, and then I can answer any questions you have. Fund 46, right now Glenn's maintenance budget's coded to Fund 41, and the board levies into that fund each year, and there's a state aid advantage to doing that. I won't bore you with that. What Fund 46 does is it gives you an option to transfer money into a fund to set aside for long-term maintenance, but you can do that at any time during the fiscal year, or you can budget for it at the beginning of the fiscal year, depending on what your strategy is. And again, I think all these conversations are part of a larger facility conversation that we need to start the process of. So what Fund 46 is, the odd thing about it is as you put money in there when you first start it, like if the board approves it Wednesday, you can put money into it, but you can't spend the money for 5 years. So that's how we ended up with the $1,000 transfer. Let's get the money in there, we'll get the clock running. The other part of this is there's a resolution that needs to be passed by the board, but this committee and the board also has to adopt the 10-year facility plan that's connected to this executive summary. That's a living document, though. You are not binding yourself to these projects over the next, it doesn't work that way. DPI is just looking for, is there a long-term strategy to go with what they consider a long-term fund? I had Glenn add 5 years. He always has a rolling 5-year capital improvement plan in place, so it wasn't that hard to roll it out 5 additional years. So again, we're asking for a transfer of $1,000 into Fund 46. And then we'll be doing a year-end budget amendment in June, and that $1,000 will come in terms of the accounting side of it, will be part of that budget amendment. So I didn't mean to make this too short of a conversation, but we've talked about this a few times, so I don't want to eat up your time either. So if there's any questions.
Mr. Como?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Just a couple here. Who would be the trustees?
The trust, I don't know if this one, in my dealings with it, we never formed actual trustees. It was always the finance committee of the board. This isn't a trust in, like, a Fund 73 or OPEB trust. It's not as rigid as that. But I would, if we do want to appoint actual trustees, I would make it the members of the Finance and Facilities Committee or some sub-part of that. Maybe have Dr. Gray and I on that if we chose. I've seen it done different ways. McWanigo, we didn't actually appoint specific trustees,
And that was okay?
and that was okay.
Really?
We reported out to the board finance committee.
Okay, so it was just whatever the active committee members were at the time?
Correct.
Are at the time?
Correct.
So, because that was going to be one question. As we change committees, we'd have to be changing trustees, and that would be
Yeah, the
kind of
board's
menacing.
understanding, and actually it's similar to this format, everything facility related came to, I had a facility and a finance meeting, they were separate, so I would report out to both, but any sort of financial report, I would do the finance committee, kind of like you do your annual audit. A formal report of pluses and minuses, revenues and expenditures.
Okay. Also, we're talking about, I'm looking at the list of the limitations in terms of Fund 46 activities and access. Item number 6, funds invested per, statute 66.0603. Is that the statute that explains what are specific types of investments that are acceptable and deemed
Yeah, it's the
low
same.
risk and,
Same guidelines.
okay.
Correct.
Okay. And are you asking for one motion this evening, or are you looking for two? We might really want to separate out the approval of the long-term capital list, capital items list, from the actual resolution as opposed to one motion.
Yeah, I was gonna leave that up to the committee on how they want to structure that motion, or motions. Either is fine.
So we would have to do the 10-year maintenance plan first.
Right.
Do you want to separate it? No.
I'll make a motion to approve the 10-year long-term capital improvement plan as presented.
Have a second? Thank you. Any questions?
The 10-year plan, yep.
Yes, this is just the 10-year plan.
I have a couple questions on it,
Questions?
so
Glenn, do you?
hop back up. Just a couple questions about the wording of some of the stuff. And you would be the perfect person to ask, Glenn. On the, 2016-17, there are things that are just listed as school multiple roof work. Are we anticipating that we just do patches? Do we do that? And then we have a specific budget for it? The first one, actually, the first line item in the 16-17 is roof work for $100,000, but no school is listed.
That's for multiple schools.
Yep.
Could have listed them out, but I didn't. It's just like some repair work.
Okay, so it's
Or-
patching,
yeah.
we're re-graveling or
Yep.
whatever we're doing, okay. And then the other question I had was, it says, raise barn and build district storage facility for 17-18, but there's no school, and I'm assuming OT is outside trade?
Yeah. No, one time. That would be
Oh,
a
is that one
one-time,
time?
yep.
Okay.
And the barn is the barn that sits on Oakdale Road.
Oh, okay.
It is another property that we have that's falling apart.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, no, I would, okay. And then, the district building storage facility?
My wish would be to tear that down and build a storage building.
Okay,
This district does not have storage.
right.
We are always clamoring. I tell people, if you want me to take it to the farm, you know, I can take it there, but it's probably not coming back.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just want to comment on the barn. So you're raising the barn? Is that what you want to do?
I would like to raise the barn, yeah.
So I pay $4 for a barn board to do artwork on them. So just don't burn it or something. I mean, there's pieces of that that can be sold. You know that, right?
That one we will do a little differently because of the popularity of barnwood now.
Yeah.
Is we are looking into, I think, the county took a barn down not too long ago, and they were able to salvage some of it out, and we are going to look at doing some of the same things, hopefully.
And when you said, sorry, can I ask one more thing? Thank you. And then when you talked about storage, when I think about, and I think I've asked Todd this before, when I think about all the schools that have gotten new doors or doorknobs or chairs or any of that kind of thing, that is so popular right now. And if we have storage, or if we have a lack of storage because we have storage facilities that are full of that, why don't we have some type of a sale and get rid of that, and then we'll have storage again?
Fortunately, we don't have storage facilities that are full of equipment anymore. A lot of the storage rooms that are in our buildings are now being used for another function in the building. So we've lost our storage space, so we don't have a lot of things in storage. And if we do, we will do a thing on Craigslist once in a while saying that the district is selling this and that. So we put it out there
Okay.
for.
Sell the old stuff.
Okay, I've never seen it, but that's great.
Good. Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of improvement fund it's for the district's 10-year maintenance plan only.
I,
Say aye.
Aye.
Right, any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Then we'll go back to the approval for the establishment of the Fund 46 long-term capital improvement.
I move approval for Fund 46.
You have a motion and a second. Any questions on that? Joe?
did the motion include the approving the resolution?
No, it did not, because we already approved the resolution.
No, we approved the 10-year
Oh,
plan.
I
There's
see.
an actual
I'm sorry.
resolution that goes with it. I
I'll
assumed it was in.
rephrase.
I just assumed that would go with it, right? Because you'd have to have the,
We need the resolution to actually establish
Would you
the
like to-
the fund, the trust.
you want to amend
Trust
the
fund?
motion?
Okay, I'll amend the motion. I'll restate the motion.
All right,
Approval of establishment of Fund 46, Long-Term Capital Improvement Fund, and said resolution.
that fine with you, Karen? All right. New motion before us. Any questions on that? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. So are you going to do the approval of monthly vouchers?
Yes,
Okay,
we had one voucher question, and it related to Health Stat. They do the administration for the clinic. And on the voucher, there was a $26,276 credit for a fourth quarter program administration refund due to not meeting performance guarantees. And what that entailed is HealthStat has performance metrics. So up to 100% of the annual program administration fee paid by HealthStat by the three entities using the clinic is put at risk if satisfactory performance of certain standards is not met. So their performance standards are evaluated on a quarterly basis. So in the fourth quarter, the account manager follow-up and the report delivery and employer satisfaction metrics were not met, so that resulted in that credit.
Was that the only time we've received a credit, or did we receive a credit in any other quarter?
We received credits in the first 3 quarters.
Okay. And the dollar amount, that was just for one quarter, or is that for all 3
For
quarters?
1 quarter. At the end of the year, 2 of the metrics are based on annual, and the other 7 metrics, or the other 9 metrics are based on quarterly. So it was higher in the 4th quarter because more metrics were involved.
Okay. And I thought when we first engaged with Hellstat, we were a little leery as to whether or not they're going to hold up to this their end of the bargain here. And I don't think that there have been other districts where they've fallen short. So is this maybe the first time that that's occurred for them? Do you know?
Well, the majority of the metrics they met, but they track, like general prescriptions was met each quarter, and special referrals, they didn't meet at the first, and then they met at the next 3. So some of the metrics, 2 of the metrics they did not meet, and that resulted in the 4th quarter credit. And because some of the credits are based on an annual basis, in the 4th quarter it was larger. But there's 11 different metrics that they're judged on, and that's what results in the credit.
Okay. And I know a lot of the cost savings was due to the prescriptions, that we could get generic prescriptions, we could have our doctor prescribe them. So that they hit that one, you said? That was one that they did hit?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's good. Were there any concerns that they missed some of the metrics?
Well,
I
They did
just,
have follow-up and action items. Due to some of the metrics that were not met, they took specific action items to make sure that those metrics would be met in the following quarter.
okay.
And then there's also different proposal year 2 performance metrics that we're continually looking at refining the system.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Like to make a motion to approve the monthly vouchers? Mr.
I
McCaffrey,
move approval of the monthly vouchers as presented.
second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, we have some information items, monthly budget update.
This is a monthly budget update for the month of April. And what we do in this packet is that we include on the page 3, looks at the tax collection update from the 7 different municipalities for the school district of Waukesha. And as you can see, looking at page 3, we collected $4,489,000 in revenue in the month of April, and that's in source code 211. So that's our primary revenue for local sources for the year and for this month. And then if we flip to page, which is page 5 of the packet, and it has the Skyward financial statement. It just lists the different revenue sources. And if you look at the 4th revenue source down, other categorical aid, you can see that we don't have that revenue source in yet this year, but we did last year at this time. $1,944,000 was budgeted, and last year we received $1,962,000 by this time. But the DPI did change that. We will receive that payment. It's just been switched to the month of June. And then if you look a little bit farther down on page 5 on source code 878, I'm sorry, I'll let everybody catch up. I'm just trying to look at the differences between the years.
Yep.
The capital leases, we did not, this year what we're looking at doing to avoid the lease fees is we're not, for the Waukesha 1, is we're not doing any, we did not do a capital lease, but last year at this time we did. So we do record the revenue and the expense. So in source code 878, which is like 3/4 of the way down the page, and the source codes are in the very left-hand column. It says like 10R 878. You can see that we did have $3.3 million expense last year, and this year we don't have any expense because we do not have any capital leases. So overall, right now, revenue-wise, we're right at where we're anticipated. We're at $99.1 million. And And last year, we had $103 million, and the difference is just due to the expensing of the capital lease. Then if we flip to page 6, we're looking at our salaries and benefits. We're right at where we were last year and right at where we anticipated in terms of budget. And then the last page of this packet has the self-insurance claims payable. It's page 15 of the packet. And in that page, it just tracks where we are in terms of our self-insurance for the year. So this year, when we look at our self-insurance for the month of April, we went up slightly. We went up from 2.8 million to like 2.9 million, so a slight increase in our health claims payable.
Any questions from anybody? Homo.
Since we made our last adjustments, it looks like we're all within what we expected closing out the year here.
Yes, we are. Everything's as we anticipated. We're going to make the budget amendments in the month of June. And for any of the funds that we would need to shift around and get the committee's approval on, maybe possibly reallocating some of the funds. And we did do.
So you'll have some suggestions for that?
Well,
perhaps?
that's if we have any, but Darren and Doc agree, we did already, in 2 facility meetings ago, did do some budget amendments earlier this year and redirected some funds. So we'll see if there's anything more, but the majority of the funds have probably already been redirected.
Okay, so
There may not be any additional
probably
funds.
pretty small
Yeah.
adjustments coming along,
Yes.
is what I'm hearing you say.
But overall, when you look at our budget compared to last year, and you look at it compared to where we're saying budget-wise in our plan, we're right on where we had planned. We did this year take the leases for the Apple purchases, and we did purchase that directly. That's in our capital objects, so we did have a $1.3 million purchase, and that was approved 2 facilities meetings ago for the purchase of the 3,000 iPads and 20 MacBooks. And that purchase was completed via the district's P card, and that generated a cash rebate of $23,000 and a cost avoidance of $17,812 in interest expense. So overall, the general fund, we're right at where we're anticipated and right in line with last year.
Yeah, so that was a strategy switch in terms of lease versus buy, which I think will pay off for us in the long run. So you don't really anticipate any other strategy changes at the end of the year for adjustments?
Not nearly as significant as what we looked at 2 months ago or 3 months ago when we did that last amendment. There might be some plan we put together. One thing I am have knocked around since arriving here, but again, waiting to see how this month of May cleans out, is right now we have that Fund 38 debt related to that OPEB issue. Fund 38 comes out of operational dollars. It's not referendum-approved debt, so it comes out of your revenue limit authority, is maybe buying down some of that principal if there are some funds available. It would provide us budget flexibility in future years. If you remember our budget forecast, this coming year looks pretty good, and then the year after that's hopefully all right, and then it gets a little, hairier in terms of projected deficits. So the idea that we've been, you'd save interest, but you'd also really be buying some budget flexibility in those years. So that's one idea we kind of have just knocking around. But at this point, you just have to see how those last payrolls kind of clear out. So, so we'll see.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on, thank you, Joe. Next information item is the 2015-16 membership audit results.
Our district, we're required by DPI, and on the second page of the packet, it lists the membership audit requirements. But DPI requires that all districts are at least selected once every 4 years. And what the membership audit entails is the outside auditor comes in and it examines our student attendance records, that determines our official student counts for the 3rd Friday of September and the 2nd Friday of January. It takes a look at those counts, and it does that for every district in the state. So at least once every 4 years, you're going to be selected for this audit. And we were we were selected this fiscal year, and they audited our summer school attendance records. And then if you look at, starting at page 3 of the report, which is numbered page 2, it goes through and it lists the different audit procedures that our outside audit firm comes in. They go through 36 different audit procedures as required by the state to go through the membership audit. And as you can see, we only had one finding, and that was for procedures number 29, and we had 2 more students that were added to the September account. So overall, I feel it was a very successful membership audit. The student services, technology, enrollment office, business office, everybody did a good collaborative effort in looking at and utilizing our Infinite Campus system to really refine the process. And we continue to do that on a regular basis to make sure that the attendance records are completely accurate. So I feel it was a really successful membership audit, and next time we will only be selected if it's a random basis.
Okay. Questions, anybody? Mr. Como?
Yeah, this is a fantastic report. I mean, when you look at roughly 14,000 students enrolled, including eAchieve, this is great. Our previous membership audit, I think we were off by 29. So we've made some great strides and some improvements there. And I mean, I think off by 2 for 14,000, and you know, you think, well, how can we be off ever? Well, students come and go, families move, things happen, and keeping track of all that isn't as easy as what it might just appear to be. So I think hats off to Darren and your group on that, and all the groups that participate in that.
Hey, White Rock Campus Lease Agreement.
Yeah, Joe was nice enough to stay. Sorry about the agenda placement, Joe. He's been in conversation with Adult Day Services of Southeast Wisconsin about potentially leasing part of our White Rock campus, just under 4,000 square feet, effective this August, and for a three-year term. So really what we did was we used our Richardson lease and just kind of modified it to fit White Rock, and it's very similar. So, you know, we don't see any concerns here. There's certainly space at White Rock campus after the shuffling of the 4K services more into our schools. So that's not the issue. And I asked Joe to be here to talk about the types of services being offered and how it fits in with an overall strategy for serving citizens in Waukesha. So the lease agreement would generate, just to hit the numbers very quickly, just under $46,000 in revenue for the district over a 3-year period. But that's really the end of the financial impact. So if there's any questions that Joe and I can answer for you, we have just this information. If everything looks good, or if there's things we need to follow back, we plan on bringing it back to the committee in June.
Reinischek.
What would this look like for the Sale kids and then for the East Charter School?
These services would have next to no contact for East in and of itself. For the students that are there for Sale, the Waukesha Transition Academy, this would be an extension opportunity for those students. So WTA would still exist in its existence. This is a service for those adults that have moved on beyond high school, and to provide them with on-the-job job training, daytime opportunities, leisure opportunities, experiences in navigating the community. One area that communities, and not just Waukesha, but communities in general, continues to struggle with is, what do we do with adults that have more significant disabilities? What do we do to provide a service for them during the day? Adult Day Services does that for that population of our community. They have a strong history in the Milwaukee area and the Waukesha County, Washington County area, providing services for a number of years in both areas. And they approached us on an individual. And they said that they were looking to expand into at that same time, we were looking at moving 4K out of the first floor of the Welk, and it just started to make sense that we could provide this extension for our young adults at the Transition Academy.
Some of our Waukesha Transition Academy students then just stay there as they are maybe 21 by that time?
It's possible. It's possible. This is a separately funded, a separate opportunity than the school district. So outside of the space, they would be running their own program, providing their own services there. It is convenient in that we have students attending school upstairs that could go downstairs for adult programming outside of the school day, or when they're done with school at 2021, they could begin adult services down there as well.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. The first thing I wrote down here is I thought there could be some synergies between this and SAIL. And I didn't even think of the continuity aspect that was brought up in just the last conversation. So I actually think that these programs could have some dovetailing and have some synergies that could really be of benefit to, I think at times, an underserved population. And I actually am pretty excited about this. From a lease perspective, I mean, it seems to be pretty straightforward, especially if we're using the Richardson template. I didn't really see anything that stood out there. And this is a day program, right? There is no residential aspect to it, correct?
There is not a residential aspect to it. Waukesha as a community does house a number of group home facilities for adults, and this is an opportunity for those adults who are in group home settings to access the community in a much broader sense than they may currently be doing. So in that sense, there is a residential component in the community, but not at all associated with adult day services.
Okay. And the one thing that's different between the Richardson lease and this one, or the Richardson scenario in this one, is we're sharing facilities versus for Richardson, they have complete, they're using the entire facilities. So what are we doing from an insurance perspective? Or what are we requiring them to have?
Yeah, they still have to have the same level of coverage, but it's no more than a facility use. Someone who uses our facilities on a regular basis, we require them as part of a facility use. So as long as they hit the limits of coverage, that's all we've asked for them. But that's a good follow-up question that I can get clarification on.
Let's make sure we're at the right level.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, that's a good question.
McCaffrey?
What are the hours of operation on?
That's really going to be flexible based off of what the community needs. It is a day service. It's not a 24-hour-a-day service. When we entered into our conversations and explained that we did have the Transition Academy upstairs, and with a dismissal time at 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the afternoon, it did make them reflect a little bit differently on what would be their traditional hours of operation from, say, 8 to 4 o'clock, 8 to 5 o'clock, because they do have an opportunity to provide service to adults beyond what would be our school. So they were receptive to the idea, actually came up with the idea of running what would be non-traditional hours for them, but not hours that would be, again, 24.
Okay. And then the monthly rent, is that comparable to what we're charging? I think it's 33.
Yeah, then we just adjusted the square footage. Per square foot, right?
And we're paying for the heat, water?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, the square footage is slightly higher in this agreement than it is
we just-
for the Richardson school lease.
The cost per square foot? you
Cost
mean?
per square foot is a little bit higher, not
was the same.
substantially, but a little bit higher to account for some of those things. Because again, we're still heating the building for the school that's upstairs. And then we also are gonna have a number of professional staff that are working out. If you can picture the first floor of White Rock, more near the gym, we're gonna have professional staff housing down there. So it's not gonna run as an additional cost outside of what perhaps might be a few additional toilet flushes a day. We're not looking at substantial.
How do we determine the rent on a per foot basis? Rent per square foot is? I mean, how did we come up with $1,277 for 4,000 square feet?
Yeah, and again, we used Richardson as kind of our guide. I don't,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
if I was asked,
that
and
way
we've
either.
never done it before, I would call some industrial realtors and ask what's a fair,
So we feel we're within the ballpark of what would be square foot on institutional.
yes.
Mr. Como?
But I think we did a little bit of due diligence 3 years ago when we did the
Comparables out there.
Richardson agreement. So not much has changed since then from an inflationary perspective. So I think those numbers are probably okay.
You know how much we're getting a month for the Pleasant?
Oh, for Richardson? What our monthly take on that is?
When we looked at this analysis, I mean, it was all comparable to Richardson School. Like Joe said, it's slightly higher. I don't know the exact amount, but the square footage is very comparable.
Yeah, well, okay.
You know, remember what the annual,
I think the annual agreement with the Richardson School is somewhere in the $180,000.
I was thinking 150 or $180,000.
And that, it was a progressive lease, where there was an increase cost every year. So the Richardson, does eventually get in. 12, I don't.
Charging Richardson 15,000 a month? How much are we charging,
For adult,
100?
we're charging annual rent for this agreement, it's 15,320. The 1,200, it's the monthly. But the square footage is,
Richardson?
I believe the Richardson School or the Pleasant Hill School is about 45,000 square feet.
Okay,
Pleasant Hill, I'm sorry.
okay, there, yeah, okay, already.
that's right, with this agreement, we went with one flat rate over 3 years rather than having to track the inflationary
And
factor.
the space, to picture the space, we're talking about what is
Yeah.
the current library space.
Okay.
With the attached conference room.
Okay.
The office that would be in that library space, right now where the librarian would be working.
Okay.
There's 2 storage rooms, very small storage rooms, 50 square feet-ish, and then 1 classroom across the hall that could act as their
Okay.
service area and an office area. And there's some bathroom space located close to that,
And it's on the first floor, it's on the,
right from the parking lot.
On the back side.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can't remember if this was a want that I heard or if this actually happened, but didn't we replace all the toilets to be those little 3-year-old 4K potties?
Correct.
So how are
be-
these big guys gonna sit on there?
We're gonna be adult fitting the bathroom that is gonna be
Okay.
done. Picture the entrance in between the classroom space and the library. It's farther south in the building, still adjacent to the parking lot. When you walk in there, there's a classroom currently with a 4K size bathroom in there. That 4K size bathroom is gonna be upgraded, adult toilets and sinks, and then that'll be their
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. With that, we have no other business, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much.